Tuesday, April 20th, 1999. At Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado, the day started just like any other. Students filled the hallways, chatting about weekend plans, sports games, and upcoming exams. Teachers prepared their lessons. No one had any reason to believe that by the afternoon, their school would become the site of one of the deadliest school shootings in American history. Among the students walking through those halls were Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, two seniors who, on the surface, seemed like just another pair of teenagers. But behind their everyday appearances was a darkness that had been brewing for years. Eric Harris, intelligent, charismatic, and manipulative. But beneath his charm, he harbored deep resentment and violent fantasies. His personal writings revealed an obsession with destruction and revenge. Dylan Klebold, more reserved than Harris, he struggled with depression and self-hatred. In his journal, he wrote about feeling lost, rejected, and longing for an escape. Together, they formed a dangerous duo, one that fed off each other's darkest thoughts, convincing themselves that the world deserved to burn. The signs were there, hidden in plain sight, journals and videos. They documented their hatred, their plans, and their desire for infamy, past violent behavior. They had already been in trouble with the law, arrested in 1998 for breaking into a van. Alarming conversations, friends and classmates later recalled disturbing comments, talk of bombs, weapons, and getting revenge on the school. But no one took it seriously. After all, they were just two high school kids. What harm could they really do? That morning, Eric and Dylan arrived at school as usual. But this wasn't just another day for them. In their cars were duffel bags filled with weapons and explosives. In their minds, a countdown had already begun. At 11:10 a.m., they entered the cafeteria, blending in with the crowd. By 11:19 a.m., everything would change. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold didn't plan just another school shooting. They envisioned a massacre on an unprecedented scale. Their goal wasn't simply to kill. They wanted to outdo any previous act of mass violence in American history. Their plan was inspired by the Oklahoma City bombing, 1995, and they intended to detonate powerful homemade bombs inside the cafeteria, causing the building to collapse and kill hundreds of students in an instant. When survivors ran outside in panic, Eric and Dylan would be waiting with their firearms, ready to pick them off one by one. If everything went according to plan, they would kill over 500 people before finally taking their own lives. Their final hours as ordinary high school students were chillingly uneventful. 5:30 a.m., Eric and Dylan recorded their final videos. The basement tapes? In them, they said goodbye to their families, mocked the people they planned to kill, and left behind their twisted legacy. 7 a.m., they arrived at a local blackjack pizza restaurant where Eric worked for a casual breakfast. 10:30 a.m., they loaded their cars, a black BMW and a dark blue Honda Civic, with duffel bags filled with sawed-off shotguns, semi-automatic weapons, and homemade bombs. 11:10 a.m., they drove separately to Columbine High School, parking in two strategic locations to trap students trying to escape. Once inside, Eric and Dylan calmly walked into the cafeteria, each carrying a 20-pound propane bomb disguised in a duffel bag. They placed them near tables, set the timers for 11:17 a.m., and walked back outside to their cars, waiting for the explosion to start their killing spree. But something went wrong. At 11:17 a.m., the cafeteria was packed with over 400 students. Yet, nothing happened. Their bombs failed to detonate. For a brief moment, their carefully planned massacre seemed like it might fall apart. But Eric and Dylan had come too far to stop now. At 11:19 a.m., they grabbed their guns, looked at each other one last time, and walked toward the school entrance. And then they opened fire. At exactly 11:19 a.m., the first gunshots rang out. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold stood near the west entrance of Columbine High School, wearing trench coats and carrying their firearms. Their first targets? Rachel Scott, 17, and Richard Castaldo, 17, who were sitting outside enjoying lunch. Without warning, Eric fired his shotgun. The bullet struck Rachel in the chest, knocking her to the ground. Richard, confused and in shock, barely had time to react before another shot hit him in the arm and chest. He collapsed, unable to move. Dylan then walked closer to Rachel. He looked into her eyes and shot her in the head, making her the first fatality of the Columbine Massacre. Students inside heard the gunshots but assumed it was a senior prank, until windows shattered and bullets tore through the walls. As panic set in, Eric and Dylan moved toward the main hallway, shooting at anyone in sight. Teacher William Dave Sanders, a beloved coach, saw what was happening and immediately started evacuating students. He ran down the halls, screaming for everyone to get out, hide, or run to safety. Meanwhile, students inside the cafeteria heard the noise and rushed to escape, some climbing over tables, others slipping on the floor in their desperate attempt to get away. Security cameras in the cafeteria captured the moment when hundreds of students ran for their lives, some hiding under tables, others pushing through emergency exits. Eric and Dylan were relentless. They laughed, cheered, and taunted their victims as they fired indiscriminately. At 11:29 a.m., Eric and Dylan entered the Columbine Library, where more than 50 students and teachers were hiding under tables and desks. What followed was a bloodbath. They mocked their victims, calling them pathetic and weak. They played a sick game, asking terrified students if they believed in God before shooting them. One of the most tragic moments came when Cassie Bernal was hiding under a desk. When asked if she believed in God, she said yes. In response, Eric shot her in the head. 10 students were killed in the library alone, making it the deadliest part of the massacre. Inside the school, trapped students dialed 911, whispering into their phones as they tried not to be heard. One chilling call came from a student inside the library, begging for help as gunfire echoed in the background. The dispatcher listened as students screamed, prayed, and cried, before the line suddenly went silent. Outside, police and SWAT teams had arrived, but confusion and fear delayed their response. Officers did not immediately enter the building, believing it was a hostage situation. Inside Columbine, students were left on their own, hiding, bleeding, and waiting for help that didn't come fast enough. The nightmare was far from over. For nearly 20 minutes, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold had terrorized Columbine High School, leaving behind a trail of devastation. But now their killing spree was slowing down. The two gunmen wandered the hallways, seemingly disoriented, unfocused. They tried shooting at more students but missed. They attempted to ignite bombs, but most failed. They peeked into classrooms, but by now, most students had barricaded themselves inside. It was as if the adrenaline had worn off. Their carefully orchestrated massacre hadn't gone according to plan. The bombs hadn't detonated. Eric and Dylan returned to the library, where they had left the most carnage. The room was eerily silent. Most of the survivors had managed to escape, leaving only the bodies of those they had killed. Here, the two sat down, exhausted, quiet. They exchanged a few words, a final moment of twisted camaraderie, and then at 12:08 p.m., they turned their guns on themselves. Dylan Klebold shot himself in the left temple. Eric Harris placed his shotgun under his chin and pulled the trigger. Just like that, it was over. For nearly 50 minutes after the last shot was fired, police still hesitated to enter the school, fearing explosives or potential accomplices. At 1:09 p.m., SWAT teams finally stormed the building, clearing rooms one by one. What they found was a war zone. Hallways littered with bodies, pools of blood, and abandoned backpacks. The cafeteria still filled with uneaten lunches and discarded notebooks. The library, a scene of absolute horror. At 2:38 p.m., police officially declared the school secure. When the final count was revealed, 12 students and 1 teacher were dead. More than 20 others were injured, and millions across America were left asking, how could this happen? In the days that followed, Columbine High School became a symbol of national grief. Candlelight vigils were held in Littleton, Colorado. The names of the victims were read on national television. Flowers, photos, and handwritten messages covered the school's entrance, left by those mourning the lives lost. More than 2 decades later, Columbine remains a chilling reminder of how quickly tragedy can strike. For the survivors, the memories never fade. For the families, the pain never truly heals. And for the world, the question still lingers. How do we prevent this from happening again? If this story shocked you, made you think, or gave you a new perspective, let us know in the comments. And if you want more true crime stories like this, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Share this video so more people can learn about the events that shaped history, because stories like this should never be forgotten.